Welcome back for another Ram React. So today we're going to be doing a follow-up on our story about Roy Den Hollander, the man who shot the family of Judge Esther Salas, who had just recently gotten the Epstein financial case involving Deutsche Bank. So we are going to take a look here a little bit more at who this Roy Den Hollander is, because there have been some interesting developments in terms of his past and what he might be involved in. And while nothing here is actually going to paint a picture and say exactly what's going on here, it's just more information for the fire, and it's interesting to say the least. So, alleged Salas family assailant previously worked for a U.S./Israeli intelligence-linked firm. Now, this is what gets really interesting, seeing that he did work for a firm that has ties to intelligence. We also know that Epstein and Maxwell had ties to at least Israeli intelligence. We're not sure about U.S. yet, but I would think that probably a little bit of both going on there, because our intelligence agencies do work closely together. So there might be some ties here. Let's go ahead and get into this report. I don't know if we're going to read the whole thing. It is pretty long, but let me try to cover all the pertinent information here. The alleged gunman who killed the son of Esther Salas, the judge recently assigned the Epstein-Deutsche Bank case, worked for a company of corporate spies and mercenaries with ties to intelligence and also to Deutsche Bank. So that might be something that we find out too. It might not be that this is actually related directly to Epstein. It might just be that this is because of Deutsche Bank, which Deutsche Bank has a reputation. Now, I can't say precisely, and I have to make sure I don't make any direct accusations, but they certainly have a reputation for being a place where criminals can clean their laundry or can launder their money. So I don't know whether that is, they've paid a lot of fines for it. So I think a lot of that is actually pretty well in the open. So let's go ahead and continue here. The news of the shooting of the husband and son of Esther Salas, the judge recently assigned to oversee the Jeffrey Epstein Deutsche Bank case, caused shock and confusion while also bringing renewed scrutiny to the Epstein scandal just a week after Epstein's main co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, was denied bail in a separate case. The case Salas is set to oversee is a class action lawsuit brought by Deutsche Bank investors who allege that Deutsche Bank failed to properly monitor customers that the bank itself deemed to be high risk, including, among others, the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The case came after New York State Department of Financial Services had settled with Deutsche Bank over the bank's failure to cut ties with Epstein-linked accounts, resulting in Deutsche Bank paying $150 million fine. Unlike other financial institutions, they failed to disclose all of its accounts linked to Epstein until less than a month prior to his arrest last year, even though the bank had identified him as a high risk years before. So yeah, this years before, he was already arrested for solicitation of an underage, quote unquote prostitute. That's what they call them, but we all know that they were really just mostly underprivileged girls that were victims of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and that were put in these situations and intimidated into being exploited, which is a terrible crime against humanity. Beyond the tragedy of Sunday's shooting, which claimed the life of Salas's only child, the quick discovery of the death of the main suspect, Roy Den Hollander, of a self-inflicted, quote, self-inflicted gunshot to the head before he could be arrested or questioned by authorities, has led to speculation that there's more to the official narrative of the crime than meets the eye. And yeah, I think there's definitely more to this than I don't buy for a second that this guy was just angry about his anti-feminist views and that kind of thing. The most likely reason for any such damage control effort lies in the fact that both U.S. law enforcement investigations and mainstream media reports have consistently downplayed the connections of Jeffrey Epstein's sexual trafficking and financial crimes to intelligence agencies in the U.S. and Israel. Yes, we know about the past of Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, being tied to Mossad, and the theory that's creeping around now is essentially that Ghislaine Maxwell, after her father's mysterious death, which they're going to talk a little bit more about here later, that she essentially took the reins and she took control of the operations, and that she essentially was Epstein's Mossad handler. Now, again, this is just a theory; it's not proven yet, but we will see how all this plays out, because there is certainly some intrigue to that story. Royden Holler previously worked for a New York firm that has been described as a private CIA with ties to those countries' intelligence agencies and also ties to Deutsche Bank. And we can see here on Royden Hollander's own website, this is from roydenhollander.com. If you go to his resume here, which I think we're already on, but just you can see that he worked for Kroll Associates, Russia, from 1999 to 2000, and managed and upgraded Kroll's delivery of intelligence and security in the former Soviet Union. Now, Kroll is the organization that is being talked about here is essentially a private CIA. So just knowing that he worked for them puts him in that realm of intelligence assets, of spies, of potentially even some of these blackmail scandals, the compromat schemes that have been created. And there was more information that I dug into. It's not in this article, and it looked like it was actually from his own writings and his own book, where he was in Russia, and there was this bar, and in the basement of the bar was a modeling agency, and he went out with this girl. I think it might have even been the woman that he eventually married and brought home that dumped him. And how he wanted to go out with her again, and she said she had to ask permission. And so it seems like they were running a very similar scam to what Epstein and them were doing, where they were using young prostitutes for compromat. Now, again, that's not something that I can prove entirely. More research has to be done on that, but it is something that you should go look into. I couldn't find anything that I really felt comfortable putting up here because it was mostly screenshots of pages, but I couldn't see the larger context of is this really from his writing and things like that. So I didn't want to bring that to the table and have it end up being false. So again, I'm just pointing you in the direction to do research on. So according to his website, Den Hollander once worked for Kroll Associates' Moscow office, where he managed and upgraded Kroll's delivery of intelligence and security in the former Soviet Union from 1999 to 2000. A few years prior, Kroll had won a considerable bid from the Russian government to locate money allegedly spirited out of the country by the directors of state enterprises when they realized that privatization was inevitable. The Kroll executives in charge of the Russian portfolio prior to Den Hollander were E. Norbert Garrett, a former CIA station chief, so there we go, he's ties to U.S. intelligence, in Cairo and Kuwait, and Joseph Rossetti, a former chief of security for IBM. This is one thing that we're learning through all of this, is that people like to talk about capitalism, but what we're really seeing in America, especially over the last 30 to 40 years, is corporatism, where we have this intermingling of government and private business. And it's creating something that is actually kind of looking like a version of the Chinese model, which is something that I've talked about before, is that China is the model for the New World Order. The global government, is they're trying to base it off of China. And the more we dig, the more we're starting to see these people from private industry working with CIA, and it's kind of starting to look like we actually have more of a Chinese system than we realize. During that period and prior to the hiring at Kroll, Den Hollander worked as a lawyer in Russia regarding legal and business issues, including international financing and marketing, and married a Russian woman he met during his time there that he subsequently claimed as part of the Russian mafia, and that was the story that I was just telling you about a minute ago. Founded by Jules Kroll in 1972, Kroll Associates would later become known as the CIA of Wall Street and Wall Street's private eye, and was alleged to be an actual front for the CIA by French intelligence agencies, according to the Washington Post. Part of the reason for this nickname, which was once a boasting point for top Kroll executives, owes to the fact that the firm frequently hired former CIA and FBI officers, as well as former members of MI6 and Mossad. So there we just have this melting pot of intelligence and private intelligence and public officers coming together, which is, again, China's the model. K2, let's see, where was I? K2 Intelligence, the successor of Kroll Associates, founded by Jules Kroll and his son Jeremy in 2009, has similar hiring practices, counting former FBI and NSA officials among its ranks, alongside former high-ranking members of the Israeli Defense Forces, and Shin Bet, Israel's domestic intelligence agency. Kroll also boasted ties to the Bush family, with Jonathan Bush, George Bush Sr.'s brother, serving on its top corporate advisory board, and Kroll was also employed by Bill Clinton's first presidential campaign. So this guy, you can see that even working for this company, this guy was tied in, at least in the network of influence, to all of these shady people who deep staters. Let's just call them what they are. They're deep staters. I mean, we all know the Bushes and the Clintons. They're all involved in the deep state operations. And this Kroll firm seems to be almost like the private mercenary and spy wing of the deep state, and this guy worked for them. So, again, we don't have any smoking gun here. We don't have any 1 + 1 = 2, anything that definitively, but we do have links that need to be investigated. But we're only going to see the media pump out this narrative of this anti-feminist lawyer who had some gripe against women, because it's going to shade him probably against right-wingers for the most part, because, or not even, I don't even like to say the term right-wingers. I mean, just conservatives, people who are not intersectionalists. So it's going to shade them. It's going to shade him as one of us anti-intersectionalists, and that doesn't seem to be the story at all. We see his ties, and we see the coincidence of it happening 4 days after she got the Epstein case. Again, this might not even absolutely necessarily be about Epstein himself. It could be about Deutsche Bank. It could be about other criminal enterprises going on at Deutsche Bank. We don't know. So let's see. Though it's mainly involved in corporate security and investigations, Kroll has also frequently investigated targets of Washington foreign policy, including Saddam Hussein, and was also the company tapped to reorganize Enron in 2002. Kroll Associates also has long been subject of scrutiny for those that question the official narrative of the attacks of September 11, 2001. Wow. I mean, this whole story is just like a conspiracy theorist wet dream here. I mean, this is nuts. I've never been a 9/11 truther, but at the same time, I kind of take the stance of I don't know, and there's only so much that I can put faith in. They talk about all kinds of things like, oh, well, the beams wouldn't have melted, and I don't know the science behind that, and so I don't try to delve into those sort of conspiracy theories that there's certain scientific knowledge or scientific evidence, things that are just above my head. There's some things that I just have to admit are too big for me to comprehend, and the whole 9/11 truther thing is one of those things. But, there are obviously some very suspicious things involved, so we can have our theories, but at the end of the day, I don't know. So let's see. Kroll Associates has also been, given that the company was put in charge of security of the World Trade Center complex from the 1993 bombing up through the 2001 attacks, and has no shortage of ties to companies and individuals that profited from the attacks. Kroll itself experienced a surge in business following the events of 9/11, a day when its top executives all avoided going to work, despite ostensibly providing security for the complex. That could be a little bit misleading, because if you're talking about top executives of Kroll, they might not have actually been stationed at the World Trade Center. So, again, I always talk about framing of the mainstream media and how they frame certain narratives to make you jump to certain conclusions that may or may not be relevant. I kind of see a little bit of that going on right here, and saying, all avoided going to work. Well, all avoided going to work, or all avoided going to the World Trade Center. Those are two different things. They might not have supposed to have been at the World Trade Center if they're top executives. A similar surge in business for Kroll followed the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, after the company's investigations into Saddam Hussein and the Ba'ath Party finances has been used as partial justification for military incursion. Kroll became a major provider of mercenaries, along with companies like Blackwater and DynCorp, to the U.S. invasion and subsequent occupation through its subsidiary Kroll Security International. Its clients included the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, which is long fronted for the CIA, and also provided mercenaries for the war in Afghanistan. I mean, these guys just seem like they are just up to their neck in the deep state swamp. I mean, these guys are. This is a swamp creature company that this Royden Hollander worked for. So it's again just more intrigue. No smoking gun, but there's got to be something here. It's too many coincidences. Too many coincidences. How many times before it just becomes a mathematical impossibility? Let's see. Kroll executives over the years have commented on the press on their commented to the press on their reputation as a private CIA, and have also noted the advantages of being private as opposed to public intelligence agency. For instance, E. Norbert Garrett, the former CIA official turned Kroll executive, told The New Yorker in 2009 the following. Garrett explained the disparity between what Kroll could do and what the CIA could do in a place like Sudan. They have to rely on public and covert sources, he said, but we can go straight to Salah Idris. I'm not sure who Salah Idris is. He's our client, after all. So they're basically saying that they can skirt the law, essentially. They can skirt national interests, which is part of what makes the swamp so disgusting, is that you can mix and mingle these public officials with private entities that can skirt the law on behalf of the public officials and then can go out and carry out terrible deeds. Like who knows what they did in Sudan. We can be manipulated, of course, shown incomplete information, and sometimes we have to walk away from a case if we don't trust somebody. But we definitely have some advantages. Kroll Associates and the Epstein network. So we're going to go deeper down this rabbit hole here. Aside from Kroll Associates' own role as a private intelligence firm, it is worth pointing out that Jules Kroll had an odd meeting with Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, shortly before his death, alleged by most Maxwell biographers and his family to have been a homicide. So most people think that Robert Maxwell was actually killed, and we all know that Robert Maxwell was... There were thoughts that he was working with the Kremlin in the 1950s, or when it was the USSR. There were certain academics that were flagging him and kind of alerting the CIA he might be Russian, he might be Soviet intelligence, because he was trying to get all of these studies converted into Russian, which in the 1950s at that time wouldn't happen. I mean, there had to have been something very off about that. And then we've also found out that he worked with Mossad as well. So we know that he was an intelligence asset. So they met with Maxwell shortly before his death, and alleged to be a homicide. Roughly 2 weeks before his death, Kroll met with Maxwell at New York's Hemsley Palace Hotel. According to a 1992 article in Vanity Fair, Maxwell had ushered Kroll and two other men out onto the patio so that their conversation could not be overheard or bugged, with Maxwell allegedly seeking to hire Kroll to uncover people out to get him, to destroy his empire, to cripple him financially, and to destroy his life and business in any way they could. The article further notes that the meeting broke up with Maxwell's promising that he would send Kroll what he called a memorandum of suspicions and unexplained events. Maxwell was working on this compendium, said the anonymous participant in the meeting when he met his death. Kroll Associates was never formally hired. Kind of makes you wonder whether Kroll Associates had something to do with it. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, that's the thing with all of this deep state business, is it's so murky, and they're covered so much by the mainstream media, by big tech, that it's hard to actually come up with solid, concrete sources on it, even though we know there's shady stuff there. And then they wonder why you get all these conspiracy theories going out there. When you can't trust the media, that's all we're left with is certain tidbits of information, and it's up to us to connect the dots, because we know that there are dots to connect, but nobody else with more access is doing that for us. And then they wonder why, conspiracy theories abound. Much more recently, Kroll came under scrutiny after being hired by disgraced media mogul Harvey Weinstein, alongside the private Mossad for hire firm Black Cube. I mean, the entanglement is just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Weinstein had been instructed to hire Black Cube by Ehud Barak, the former Israeli military intelligence head and Israeli prime minister with close ties to Jeffrey Epstein, yes, and a frequent visitor of Epstein's residences, yes. And we have pictures of Ehud Barak outside of Jeffrey Epstein's apartment, and pictures of underage girls going into the apartment shortly after Ehud Barak went in there. So, I mean, the swamp is just a cesspool. Weinstein hired Kroll to harass and cyberstalk women who had accused him of sexual assault. Weinstein was a one-time business partner of Jeffrey Epstein, and the testimony of Epstein victim Maria Farmer strongly implies that Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein shared women and potentially underage girls with the film producer. The Daily Beast later reported that Epstein had used his ties to Weinstein to impress and recruit potential victims, and at least one of those victims landed a role in a film produced by a Weinstein-owned company due to Epstein's ties with Weinstein. Kind of makes you wonder how many of these starlets out there come from this, and how they would, how they would go from being a victim to somebody who would keep their mouth shut and let the victimhood continue as these men prey upon other girls. It's flabbergasting. It's flabbergasting. In addition, Kroll's longtime executive vice president of operations, James Bucknam, was previously chief advisor to former FBI director Louis Freeh, who is, F-R-E-E-H, Free? I don't know, let's just go with Free, and is now CEO of the Free Group. Free has since become notorious for having been hired by Epstein associate lawyer Alan Dershowitz to investigate the Epstein scandal, and was also involved in the cover-up of the Penn State child molestation and abuse scandal. Oh my God. I mean, the child abuse and all of this deep state business is just, it knows no bounds. It knows no bounds. Free was also the director of the FBI when the Bureau declined to investigate accusations regarding Leslie Wexner, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Jeffrey Epstein and their involvement in sex trafficking of minors, first reported to the FBI in 1996 by Maria Farmer. The Kroll Deutsche Bank revolving door. After retiring from Kroll Associates, Jules Kroll created he created a credit rating agency. The firm was envisioned by Kroll as a credit rating agency on steroids, but has failed to make a dent. And all right, some of this stuff we can start skipping because this video is starting to get pretty long. Though it hasn't managed to become a dominant force in credit ratings, KBRA has managed to be profitable and have produced something of a revolving door between its senior department and Deutsche Bank executives. For instance, KBRA's top executive in Europe, Mauricio No, had previously been a managing director of Deutsche Bank's London branch. And in another example, vice president for credit structuring at Deutsche Bank in New York, Ian Ross, was previously employed by KBRA, and Yi-Sent Wang, managing director for KBRA and CMBS, was vice president of the credit solutions group at Deutsche Bank Securities. And was previously vice president of the credit solutions group at Deutsche Bank. So, I mean, another managing director of KBRA, Bill Bernanke, had previously served as Deutsche Bank's vice president and national relationship manager. One of KBRA's senior managing directors, Rosemary Kelly, is also a former Deutsche Bank vice president. While another, Ken Kockenmeister, God, I mean, this was Deutsche Bank's director for large loan securitization and underwriting. Some of this is like another language to me. While they may not be the biggest credit rating agency, KBRA analysts and executives frequently speak to media outlets where they comment on the state of various businesses, Deutsche Bank among them. Given the amount of overlap between Deutsche Bank and KBRA, it is unsurprising that KBRA has lobbied in the press on Deutsche's behalf. For example, KBRA analyst Christopher Whalen told Business Insider in 2016 that the problem with Deutsche Bank may be the end of Merkel's career, adding that the question is, does she want to be remembered for doing the right thing, which is to provide support for the bank and defuse the situation, or does she want to be remembered for standing by when one of the largest banks in Europe failed? So, another bank bailout. You know, these people rob us blind, and then they want bailouts from us. God, I really hope the whole central bank system, there's been whispers that Donald Trump is undermining and restructuring our economic system to abolish the central bank system. And please, dear God, let that be true. Please, dear God. It's hard to find any solid information on that. There was a couple articles that came out in Yahoo and Bloomberg, And those mysteriously went away shortly later. I had somebody ask me, hey, can you send me that article about Trump, rolling the Fed into the Treasury? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I pulled it up. Article gone. Taken off the web. And that was Yahoo News. All right, so, we don't need to get into Jeffrey Epstein's links to Deutsche Bank. We don't need to get into all this stuff. I think there was a couple things in this segment here. The narrative emerging that Den Hollander was motivated to kill Esther Salas' husband and sons due to his hatred of feminism is a rapid attempt to explain away a story that clearly warrants further investigation, albeit into avenues that mainstream media and powerful individuals in the public and private sectors prefer to remain untouched. And yes, this is true. This is true. As the heinous act targeting Salas' family has shown, individuals with a lot to lose are willing to go to the furthest extremes to keep their ties to Epstein, to keep the ties of Epstein to the financial sector and intelligence out of sight and out of mind. Indeed, just last December, Epstein's personal banker at Deutsche Bank, Thomas Bowers, the chief of Deutsche Bank's private wealth management division in New York from 2012 to 2015, was found dead in his home. His death was quickly ruled a suicide by hanging. That's how they all die. That's how they all die. They all die by hanging. Most of them from a doorknob. I mean, it's... this is... I mean, how can anybody deny the deep state at this point? How can anybody deny just the entire cesspool, the incestuous cesspool of world finances, human trafficking, major multinational conglomerations and government officials? They're all in this shit together. And we see that this Royden Hollander, he was part of this. He was not some random anti-feminist who had a gripe with this judge. That's just not what it was. This guy worked for Kroll Associates, who is just up to their neck in deep state. So, anyways, guys, I know there wasn't a whole lot to draw from this in terms of concrete. This is exactly who he was. This is exactly what happened. But I hope this just helps paint the picture. It's just more pieces to the puzzle. And we don't know exactly... I mean, yeah, we can imagine. We've got enough pieces that we can imagine what this puzzle is going to look like once it's all put together. And we have a pretty good idea. But we can't indict until the entire puzzle is put together and we see the picture with no missing pieces. And so that's what Bill Barr and Durham are working on, and Godspeed to them. I hope they get this done, and I hope they get it done quickly, because this just reeks. This reeks. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think about this video. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Parler, @RamThorburn. And if you would like to help contribute to the channel, because I do spend a lot of time putting this stuff together, especially the revved up videos, there are links to my PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar down in the description. So that's it for this one, and I hope you guys check back in. But be vigilant, do your own research, and if you find anything that you want me to report on that I haven't found on this, drop it in the comment section, send me a link, let me know, and I'd love to cover it. So you guys have a good day.